Hey, welcome to the Science Fiction and Society podcast. Um, I'm your host, Robert Najaka, and for this week's episode, we're going to be talking about Lunar Braceros 2125 through 2148, which was written by Rosada Sanchez and Beatriz Pita. Um, so I'm going to be talking about the dystopian future in the novel, and specifically science fiction's role in the portrayal of contemporary problems. Um, and past problems, and also how those relate to working class minorities being marginalized from society and treated as waste. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the title of the novel, Lunar Braceros, and um, how it references the Bracero program, which was a program between the U.S. and Mexico for agricultural workers. It was for the most part beneficial to U.S. and Mexico. It helped U.S. With the food supply during World War II, and it helped Mexico with their economy during this time. It wasn't necessarily a good thing completely, because the braceros didn't need to be paid as much as domestic workers. They were often used as ways to thwart unionizing and just prevent domestic agricultural workers from uh, pushing for better pay. Sanchez and Pizza chose to kind of focus their novel based on this program and really focus on economic prosperity over human lives. And I also just think it's kind of interesting how you incorporate science fiction and history, how the novel creates its own futurism and just this reality that is like terrifying for anyone who would be one of the Luna Braceros, like from the reservations, and just see how they are just completely mistreated. And for my next point, I'm going to be talking about forcing and challenging identity in Luna Braceros. And what I mean by forcing identity is how the Calitex state kind of forces the identity of waste on the Braceros because of them being from the res. Um, and I think the second quote is kind of just sums that up really well in how they're alienated by their positionality as res lifers. So it's kind of interesting to see the struggle for identity between the Braceros and the Calitex government, where the government is viewing them quite literally as nuclear waste and just not having any value and not having any humanity. But I think the main focus of the novel is how they resist that conformity to that identity. Um, and that's kind of that first quote I have here, where their resistance, it was a struggle to maintain their identity, and I think part of that you can see with Lydia and Pedro, where uh, she uses this kind of metaphor for going against the wind, where she needs to teach him how to resist conformity, how to go against the wind, um, because it's a problem that is still very much present for them in their society, and when they're literally, being murdered by the government. And that kind of leads into my next point, which is the effects of neoliberalism in Luna Braceros. And what I mostly mean by that is the effect of the government in Luna Braceros and uh, kind of capitalism in the future. And what I should first mention is that the definition for this form of neoliberalism that we see in Luna Braceros, which the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy calls ethos neoliberalism, they would consider it to be an inadequate definition of what neoliberalism actually is. But I think it's very descriptive of what we see in Luna Braceros, which is this last quote. Some would consider it an ideology where the focus is economic prosperity and economic growth, and that is very much what's seen in Luna Braceros, where the focus is so much on economic prosperity and growth. The Braceros are discriminated and killed and stuffed in containers with nuclear waste. And then this kind of goes back to my main theme, where we just see science fiction showing these uh, kind of contemporary problems, and I think it's kind of important that we show it, because then we can see how life could be in the future. Because um, the treatment of migrant workers, and even the reservations, are something that we have done in the past. And so if we see the effects that those could have in the future, if we don't kind of learn from our mistakes as a society, it just it shows how people can be treated off of that. And I think this review of Lunar Braceros, this second to last quote here, is a really good way of describing uh, the situation in the novel, uh, where the Calitex state has an economy that cannot sustain its capitalist model without abuses to its land and population, which is also something we can see in American history with reservations, and then in the novel with the reservations, and how just certain ways that capitalism can thrive off of abuses to people, and especially when it establishes the certain groups of people that it can discriminate against. And so I also just kind of wanted to relate this to things going on currently in our world, and part of that is the 2022 Qatar World Cup. As I'd seen from several news articles that over the span of over 10 years since they picked where the Qatar World Cup was going to be held, um, there's been over 6,500 migrant deaths from 5 different countries: India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. And one of the things I had seen from this was actually from John Oliver, where he describes that there's a problem with the work visas in Qatar, where workers weren't allowed to leave until they had completed all the work they said that they would. And I think part of that contributed to the deaths of these thousands of people. And we can also just see the effects of not treating migrant workers properly. And with Luna Braceros, it kind of seems like it's a crazy twist on things that wouldn't really happen, but at the same time, there are currently uh, situations going on that's very much like the Luna Braceros. Yeah, so in conclusion, I just think that including contemporary aspects and past aspects of society in, into science fiction just brings a lot of livelihood to it, and character, and just a sense of realism. Um, some other works of science fiction that I think are like Luna Braceros here, Cyberpunk and Ender's Game. Mostly Cyberpunk, I think, is very similar in the way that it shows an extreme capitalist model abusing its people and its land. And that one also just really reminded me of Lunar Braceros, because that one has the moon as kind of an outlet from uh, all the problems going on Earth. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for the science fiction podcast this episode. And thank you for listening.